Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinel Report. I am your host, Alex Newman. Folks, we live in a world where family is under attack, especially Christian families. I mean, basically, a Christian family's got a big, giant target on it from Satan, from the world, from the God haters. And we live in a time where it's increasingly difficult for parents to try to protect their children from the madness all around us. We live in a crooked and perverse generation. It's nothing new, but it sure seems to be getting more and more perverse. And so I'm a dad of quite a few children, and with that in mind, I'm always looking for ideas on how to do a better job. And when I got a copy of this book, I just was really enthusiastic. It was short, easy to read. It's called Keep Your Kids: How to Raise Strong Kids in an Age of Therapeutic Sentimentalism. It's written by Pastor Douglas Wilson. You may have seen him recently on Tucker Carlson. He's been getting a lot of attention lately. He's the senior minister of Christ Church in Moscow, Idaho. He's an award-winning novelist, although he's also written a number of books like this one. Haven't won anything just yet. He's married. He's got kids and 18 grandkids and great-grandchildren. Does a lot of good work. He serves on the board of the New St. Andrews College, which is a great Christian college up in Idaho. Does a lot of good work. Doug, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. So first, the obvious question: how do we keep our children in this crazy age that we find ourselves in?
The reason I wrote this particular book is a few decades ago, I wrote a number of books that were family-centered. Books on marriage, books on child rearing, standing on the promises, reforming marriage, things like that. And I recently was listening to a great book called Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. Very good book. And I realized that although principles of parenting don't change, the tactical situation on the ground has changed. So when I was writing these earlier family books, the world was still worldly, but it was still right side up. You know, a girl was a girl and a boy was a boy. You know, there were certain things that everybody knew, and we could bring biblical principles to bear in a world that was more or less right side up. And I realized that young parents today are bringing up their kids in the midst of pandemonium. They're bringing kids up in the middle of a cafeteria food fight, and the principles don't change, but how I'm to understand how they plug in, that varies, right? And the way you keep your kids is in order to bring your kids up right side up, you have to have a family that's right side up, despite the tumultuous chaos in the world outside. And that means you have to learn how to instill family loyalty. Okay, so, and the way you teach your kids to be loyal to you is by being loyal to them, right? And living that out in practical ways, investing in them, and also you as parents understanding that you are to take your marching orders for what a father or mother is supposed to do. You take that from the scriptures and not from the world, because one of the reversals that has happened is this. It used to be that parents confronted the hard world out there, and they understood that their task was to equip their children to deal with the world as it was. Today, secular parents are being taught that they're supposed to teach the world to deal with their child's feelings. So if the child feels upset or feels like a girl or feels, any particular way, those feelings reign supreme, right? Those feelings are the queen bee. And of course, the world has not changed. The world will still eat your kids if you send them out ill-equipped that way with the expectation that everyone will cater to you. Well, everybody pretends to cater to you until it's time to take you out. So basically, Christian parents have to be a lot more hard-headed about what they're doing.
Yeah, and one of the things that you say early on in the book that really struck me, I guess I'm a generation younger than you. I've got a bunch of kids now too, but I remember being raised, and you point out that back in the day, society at least sort of backed up parents, right? And today that situation is really different. If parents do what the Bible commands them to do, there's a good chance that a neighbor will call CPS, that a teacher will frown upon you, that even some people in your church might be like, what are you doing? And so now we're kind of on our own. Talk a little bit about that evolution of society and the implications of that for the family.
Yes, this is part of the suspicion that has been cast over godly parenting. So spanking is identified as abuse by definition. Now, of course, there is such a thing as abuse. All right, that really does exist. But the world has blurred godly spanking together with abuse. One of the things I've noticed is watching children that I knew as children of my own and grandchildren, when they get together and start talking, some of the when they get to talking about spanking stories, the evening descends into hilarity.
Yes.
Right. Some of the fondest memories, some of the most hilarious situations are from that context, which of course is, you would never get that from a situation of genuine abuse. And so people say really foolish things. When you hit a child, you're teaching them to hit. No, you're teaching them not to hit. You know, they're born knowing how to hit.
Right.
They clock their sister over the head with a toy truck, and you're teaching them, no, bad things happen when you do that sort of thing. Little children understand cause and effect, and the Bible teaches that deterrence works, and the Bible says that if you hate your son, you refuse to discipline your son. And so we live in an era that doesn't like personal autonomy being encroached on at all. So if a child wants to fly off into a fit of temper, it doesn't matter if it's at Walmart or at the restaurant, that is catered to. If a child is hurt, and let's say is genuinely hurt, there's a bias against teaching them to suck it up at some point. So let's say a child is really hurt. A good and godly parent is going to comfort them for a minute or two, and then say, "Okay, time to pull it together. Time to be tough. It's time to be tough." And when you don't do that, what happens is you'll see, at church or somewhere, you'll see a little kid bite it, and get up, dust himself off, and run around looking for his mom. And when he sees her, he breaks into a wail. Okay, that tells you that he is working his mom. She's not disciplining him. He's disciplining her. She's not training him. He's training her. Mm-hmm. And basically, parents need to understand that the parental role is one where you have to be the grown-up. Okay? The child doesn't understand how the world goes, and so you have to teach them how the world goes.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about three different types of parents. I really thought this was fascinating, Pastor. You talk about a ditch on both sides, right? There's the parents that are too authoritarian, and there are the parents who are too lax. I forget the exact terms you used. And you actually recommend in the book that people go and, don't just think about it yourself. Go talk to people talk to folks at your church, and ask them, where are you at as a parent? So I actually did that. I was quite surprised to find out that everybody thinks I'm too lax. My kids think exactly the opposite. But talk about those two ditches and why there's dangers on both sides of this road.
Yeah, as I'm fond of saying, on virtually every issue, there's a ditch on both sides of the road. Some parents are really severe, harsh, and other parents are lax and easygoing, and our generation, are taking our generation as a whole, we're in the lax ditch. All right, so that's the generation, and then some Christians, in a reaction to that, veer off into the other ditch. I'm not going to raise any sissies. I'm going to, I'm going to drop the hammer on them. And then they really are harsh and unloving. Well, it has to be a combination of rigidity, truth matters, but it's got to be tender and human. And one illustration I use is truth and standards and law is like the skeleton. It's like the bones. A bone is hard, rigid, unyielding. But it also should be encased in flesh. It should be alive. If you just have bones, you have a dead skeleton. If you just have flesh, you have an amorphous beanbag. No bones, no structure, no rigidity. But why don't we put the two of them together, where the stability and the strength, the truth, provides stability and security for the kids. They know where they stand. They know what they can do and not do. So they are secured by that strength, and at the same time, they're not clobbered with it. The father and mother know how to be tender when that's appropriate. They know how to be gentle when that's appropriate, and they know how to be tough when that's appropriate.
Yeah, really, really good insights in here throughout the book. I know we're not going to have time to get to all of it, but there's a few things I just really want to bring up. Right on the back, you actually pulled out a quote from your book, and you talk about biblical child rearing being a gigantic custody battle between the state and Christ. And I mean, what a powerful way to think about this. What does it mean for a Christian parent that we are in a custody battle against a state that increasingly is hostile to our values, to our beliefs, to our God-given role and responsibility in raising our children? And how do we navigate that in a way that it doesn't get us in trouble with the government per se, but still remains faithful to what we're commanded to do by God?
Okay, so one of the things I would say is get your kids away from anyone who overtly claims to have custody. Okay,
like a public school, for example,
like a public school. The public school professional educators genuinely believe that the children do not belong to the parents, and the children belong to the state. So it's not that quote is not an example of me hyperventilating. There are people who say no, children are products of the state, under the state, answerable to the state, and parents who try to interfere with that are unpatriotic. But the Bible is very clear that God has established family government. A man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two become one flesh. And then children bear their father's name. God has established this pattern in Scripture. So, and God has created three governments, basically: civil government, family government, and church government. Those are the governments that are established directly by God. The government of your quilting circle or your ham radio club, that's your club, so you can write the bylaws. You know that you can decide who's the treasurer and who's the president and whatever you want to do. But the governments that God has established, He writes the bylaws. In Romans 13, he says the civil authorities are God's deacon. He says that the husband is the head of his wife. The wife is to respect and honor him, and she is the body. And husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church. And then in the Ephesians 4, the church government, Christ ascended on high. He gave gifts to men, and those gifts included church government: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. So God writes the bylaws for all of these entities. And that means that one of the things that you can do to enhance your odds or chances in this custody battle is to have your children grow up in a home that's rightly ordered in accordance with the Word of God. Mom respects dad. Dad loves his wife as Christ loved the church. One of the best things you can do, and I would argue the best thing you can do for your children, is to fulfill your duties to your husband and wife, respectively. If dad is loving mom like he ought, and mom is respecting dad like she ought, that provides the structure that makes it possible to do everything else you need to do with regard to your kids. Because if it's tense or bad between mom and dad, everything you do to honor Jesus in your relationship with the kids is going to be seen or felt by them as hypocritical.
Couldn't agree with you more. And you actually bring something up here that hit me like a ton of bricks as I was studying education. You say right on the back of the book, our kids are made in the image of God. That's why we may not render our children to the state. Right? They belong to God. As Jesus pointed out, of course, you pay your taxes to Caesar. Caesar's image is on the coin, but God's image is on your children. So stop handing them over to Caesar. They don't belong to Caesar. And if we have time, I do want to get into a little bit more on this education subject. But you talk in the book about personal checking accounts. I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about it. Share with the folks what you mean by that.
Yes, parents have a genuine authority over their children, but authority has bounds. In this fallen world, no authority is absolute. No human authority is unlimited. Right. So let's to create a hypothetical situation. I believe a father has authority over prospective suitors that come for one of his daughters. Okay, and I wrote a book on that called Her Hand in Marriage. I believe the Bible teaches that fathers have that authority. But let's say there's a guy that comes around that mom and dad don't like. They think he's a flake, but the daughter likes him for some reason. Okay, and dad is going to say no. Okay, when he says no to this suitor, that's like writing a check for $10,000. But before he writes a check for $10,000, he needs to think for a moment about how much money he's put in the account, in her account, in her growing up years. So is the check going to clear, right? So a lot of times fathers start wielding authority when it comes time like that, but they've not spent the time filling up their kids' savings account, checking account over the years. And I've had discussions with fathers who say, "What? I read your book and you explained that this is my checking account and that's my name in the upper left-hand corner and I'm the authorized signatory on this account." And I say, "Yes, it's your checking account. You can't say, 'How can I be out of money? I still have checks left,' right? That's your checking account, but you need to wisely fill the checking account up over the course of years." And this is true.
Give us some examples of how to do that. How do we fill up our children's checking accounts so that when it comes time to write some of these checks, there's actually something in there?
Okay, going back to what I said about wives respect your husbands and husbands love your wives, men and women are different. That's another thing, is that these differences should be honored, recognized, and embraced by mom and dad so that the children grow up understanding it. Men run on diesel and women run on regular. Or you can use the illustration either way, but different kinds of fuel. Men run on respect fuel and women run on love fuel. Okay? What matters to a woman is the security of the relationship. I'm here. I'm always going to be with you, and so forth. What matters to men is the woman's respect for. So when a wife writes a respect letter, as we've encouraged wives to do this, write a respect letter to your husband. You should be focusing on abilities and achievements, things he's done. Men think in those terms, and so you don't want to be like the golden rule is a great rule for generally, but it's not a good rule for shopping for Christmas presents. Right? You don't give everybody else what you would like to get. Mm-hmm. Right? A husband wants to receive respect, a wife wants to receive love. Now, that means that mom and dad are bringing their children up in such a way as to understand this instinctively. Okay? So husbands, love your wives, but fathers also make sure to love your daughters, love on them. And when you're loving on them, you're using it over the top of their head with a snow shovel. Basically, every time your daughter walks by, you give her a hug, right? Oh, so wonderful having you around the house. Thank you for that. Gratitude, affection, that kind of thing. With boys, mothers should learn how to admire them. Look how high you jumped. Look how fast you run. Look at how well you did chopping wood with your father. Look, abilities and achievements, respecting. And so when kids see this happening all the time, they gravitate toward it naturally, and they're learning how to do it. And a father who has been affectionate and close and providing security and provision for his daughters, when they come to challenging teen decisions, no, you can't go to that party, that's a check for $100. But it clears easily because he's got $500,000 in there.
That's fantastic. I love the way you put that. I know you're very busy, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I'll just ask you this one last question. We'll figure out how to get the book. Without necessarily getting into a talk on eschatology, which maybe we can save that for another day. But are you optimistic? I mean, for years it's looked like we're just on a downward slope, headed over the cliff. We seem to have at least a little bit of a reprieve right now. We got two genders again at the federal level. But over the long term, are you optimistic that Christians will weather this current storm that we're in and come out the other side okay? And what is the role of parenting and family in that process?
Yes, I am optimistic. I am a postmillennialist. I believe that the Great Commission is going to be successfully fulfilled. But even on a natural level, I'm optimistic because in the long run, stupidity doesn't work. Right? It finally gets to, because of sin, people will rebel and rebel and rebel. But at some point, gravity takes over. At some point, it just doesn't work. So we're looking at Elon going in and slashing and burning, which is, I'm very happy about. But let's say there's no Elon, no Trump, no nothing. All of that would happen by itself naturally, right? As Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is that sooner or later you run out of other people's money. There's going to be a crisis moment regardless. So what's happening here is this is a controlled crash, right? The airplane, the federal government airplane, was going to crash, right? What Elon's doing is trying to hit something cheap. He's trying to manage a water landing, but the plane's going down. And if you successfully fought Elon off, then the plane is going to go into the side of a mountain.
It's fascinating. So this is a really, really good book, Doug, and I say that because it is. I read it. I enjoyed it. I got a lot of good tips for my own 6 children, and hopefully God will send us more. What's the best way? Is it? I know I got an advanced reader copy. Is it possible yet for people to buy this, and where's the best way to do that?
It's available. You can get it either from canonpress.com or you can get it from Amazon.
Okay.
So it's readily available, basically.
And the best way to follow your work? Are you on social media, website?
Yeah, I've got a blog. It's called Blog and Mayblog, and the address is dougwills.com. And if you go to dougwills.com and open up the front page, we've created it so there's a portal to pretty much everything I'm involved with. The college,
Fantastic.
The press, the Logos School, etc.
Fantastic. Well, you do a lot. I really appreciate you coming on the program. Thank you. I hope we can talk to you again soon, Pastor.
Great. Thank you.
Folks, the book is Keep Your Kids, How to Raise Strong Kids in an Age of Therapeutic Sentimentalism by Pastor Douglas Wilson. It really is a good book. I've got my wife reading it now. You don't have to agree with everything in it to recognize there's some value here. So go and get a copy. I want to encourage you to send this to other parents and other grandparents that may be struggling with this, folks. We really do live in a crazy time. The government is against Christian families, or at least was until very recently, and at the state and local level, that, of course, is still the case in huge parts of this country. And we've got to be prepared as parents how to navigate all this. So go get a copy of the book. Again, it's Keep Your Kids by Douglas Wilson. Also, get over to our website, libertysentinel.org, libertysentinel.org. You can sign up for our newsletter for free. You can get all kinds of resources that we've got there. You can watch all the different shows that we do, and you can find a lot of information that will be useful to you, not just on parenting, but on a whole range of subjects, news of the day, geopolitics, and much more. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Alex Newman. This is the Sentinel Report. Until next time, God bless you all.